Hey everybody, welcome back. Brand new Take Aim, and excited to get this third installment out of the Summer Management Series. First episode was Michael Hunsucker from the Heartland Bowhunter. Last week we had Blake Aradon from Unfiltered Outdoors. And this week we have Joe Suron. You might remember Joe from the Outdoor Channel, Sportsman's Channel, Hallowed Ground Outdoors. It was a great show that was on. Joe's still in the industry doing a lot of stuff for a lot of different companies, but he manages a really nice piece of ground in northeast Iowa, his family farm, so we get to hear Joe's management plan for that piece of ground. It's a great episode. You won't want to miss. All right, guys, we're live. Brand new Take Aim Outdoor podcast exclusively on the Unfiltered Outdoor app and on iTunes. But excited to speak with Joe, sir, today out in Iowa. How you doing, Joe?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, man. But I've known of you for a long time, Joe, and some of the things you've done. But if you'd like to kind of get into it with some of our listeners about some of the projects from the past that they may know you from or what you're doing now, let's go ahead and talk about that, because I know you kind of are a man of many hats, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of grew up hunting and fishing, raised in northeast Iowa, so hunting, and especially deer hunting, was kind of just what you did. And that was a passion from a young age that was blessed to have, family who did a lot of whitetail hunting, and had my grandparents lived on a farm in Iowa, so by default that kind of just was passed down to me through my grandpa and then my dad. And when I came back from college, I had plans of going into another career path, and just kind of started to watch outdoor television and stuff, and just thought to myself, hey, it'd be awesome to do something like this for a living, and completely ignorant to what that actually meant. And I never picked up a camera or edited or anything like that. Just started doing it for fun, and super long story short, one thing led to another, and we started Hallowed Ground television show, which I think we were on the air for about 6 years or so. And through that, just started making different connections and doing a lot of work on just the production end of things. And it just kind of came a time where that outgrew the need for the production, outgrew the show, and made sense for my life where I was at with 4 kids and a family and stuff. It just kind of made sense to go that direction. So for the past 4 or 5 years or so, been focused mostly on our production company, Risen Media, and just creating content and working with some great clients in the outdoor space.
Yeah, for sure. I've known of the previous show for a long time. Was always a big fan of you and the show, and always liked what you did creatively. I thought you guys were, you separated yourselves from everybody else on the market very well, and just always enjoyed the show. It was fresh and different, and and I enjoy what you do now. I watch a lot of your, like Instagram posts and Insta stories, and you still have that creative edge, which I really like, and you just do a great job. So kudos to you, Joe, because I appreciate the good content you have put out for a long time.
Oh, thank you.
Not a problem. I would like to talk about kind of just your home farm and what it's like, and some of the habitat stuff you do there.
Yeah. Man, that's a
big question.
There's a lot. A big question, right? Yeah. That's right. But I think, as a hunter, you start off because you just plain love to hunt, and then, as you develop into more of a, the natural progression of a hunter is just harvesting something, and then trying to harvest, a trophy, and then consistently harvesting a trophy. And I found throughout that progression of, as a hunter, one of the big things that you need is that kind of is the management aspect of it. And when I started off hunting, I just watched hunting television shows, and people in southern Iowa are killing giant deer every single year, and I just kind of thought by default, like, hey, I live in Iowa, I bow hunt, if I just hold out, that's going to happen. And learned the hard way by a lot of years of passing, bucks that I look back now, I was like, man, I wish I would have killed that deer. Just realizing that there aren't big deer around every single corner, and it's not a matter of just getting in the tree stand and hunting in order to harvest one. So that's really where I started just falling in love with the management process. And then the more and more I got into that, the more and more that process has made the end result more rewarding. It really is, here on our home farm, it's something that we say 365 days a year. It's not obviously every single day, but throughout the course of the year, there's always something to be done, and it's never ending. And that's probably now the part of hunting that I guess I won't say I enjoy it the most. I enjoy killing deer the most. I will say that, but the process makes that end result so much more rewarding. So we pretty much, I guess just a little background on this. The farm that I spend 90% of my time hunting, it's a family farm. We're in Iowa, but with that being said, not all Iowa is created equal. It's kind of interesting how if you travel 30 minutes to the east of us, like a deer that we have that's a 130s buck, it'll be a 145-inch buck. So it's not like just by default in Iowa you have giant deer. We have the potential for them, we have the genetics for them, but a lot of it comes down to just the landscape and how easy it is for people to kill deer and harvest deer when they're 3 years old. So trying to get a deer to maturity has been a struggle for us because we live in an area where it's tough for deer to just disappear. And there's a lot of state land, and so when a deer hits, when a handsome 2 and 3 year old ends up getting shot a lot, which is totally fine. And I think that every single hunter, you shoot what makes you happy, and that's one of the joys of just hunting. But for me, trying to manage a property and try to get deer, to maturity to 4 or 5 years old and beyond, we had to, it takes a lot of work. So this farm is 240 acres. I hunt it pretty much exclusively because I enjoy the management process of it so much. I'd rather work hard here and kill a management 8-pointer and work hard for it than go and, just maybe sit somewhere else and kill potentially a bigger deer. I just like building that backstory and the enjoyment of the whole entire process. So for us, it's in order to be able to do that, it's really a year-long process of trying to do everything right from shed hunting, basically feeding right away after the season, and then going into shed hunting and food plots, and then everything working all the way back up into the season. If you miss any one aspect of that process, you're hurting your chances of being successful the following fall. So we just really try to work and do everything right and constantly tweak and make changes, and then hopefully it results in filled tags.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, one thing I want to kind of touch on what you said was, well, for me, I'm kind of curious, what part or what county, if you don't mind saying, are you in Northeast Iowa?
Wait, how many people will listen to this?
All right, let me rephrase. Are you in one of the top 4 counties there in the Northeast?
No, we wouldn't.
Oh, okay.
No, we wouldn't be. And
okay.
It's just really interesting.
I know that area is pretty good, and I was just curious because you mentioned that 45-minute drive, how it changes, and I just wanted to talk about some of the agriculture there in the topography of the land and how that changes county to county to where you're at and what it's actually like.
Yeah, and where we're at, a lot of it is mile-by-mile sections, and the majority of it is just cropland. We're blessed on this property. We've got a river that kind of runs against it, so we do have some ridges and a little bit more. It's not completely flat, but we aren't in that Mississippi River bottom. We aren't in southern Iowa
like
where
you mentioned, nowhere to hide, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like where I'm at in southern Michigan. It's flat and everything's a 1 mile square, which doesn't lead to big chunks of ground when they're 1 mile squares. So sorry to interrupt you, but yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
That makes it hard though, for sure.
Yeah, but just another challenge.
So you have a little bit of terrain topography that kind of goes up and down, and a little. You have any kind of water on the property, or is it mostly all ag?
Yeah, we do. We have, and the property is like the area in general is flat. this property is, it's 240, and it's got a stream running through it, so it does have some good hardwood ridges. From a breakdown perspective, about there's a couple little farms on the property, and we live on the property as well. So if you kind of take out, the houses and buildings and little fields around them, it basically comes down to about 100 acres of woods and then 100 acres that are enrolled in the CRP program. And then out of those, we have designated areas for food plots and stuff. But it's kind of a 50-50 mix between CRP and woods. So that's kind of it's a gorgeous property, and 240 acres. It's tough to manage because you can't keep a deer on 240 acres. But there's a lot of things that you can do that we try to do to hold them as much as possible to try to give them the best chance of getting to that 4 or 5 year old type range, and then all in the meantime keeping the property so that we can harvest those deer as well on the property.
Yeah, one thing I noticed you just said there, Joe, that, excuse me, that a lot of people I think nowadays really overlook is how important, and if you want to touch on this a little bit, it'd be great, but how important CRP is. And it just seems to be so overlooked now. But it is, to me, if I can find a piece of ground exactly what you just said, with some hard timber or a ridge line that touches some CRP, I know where I usually like to be hunting, because it just makes for great cover and great bedding. But it just seems to be overlooked, and I think a lot of people's management plans just don't really quantify how important CRP is.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. We actually just got done. We just re-enrolled everything this past year, and in the past, a lot of CRP had been the really high, tall switchgrass, where you could, literally get lost in it. And I've read some different things about how, a mature buck per square acre will prefer CRP over the woods. But now this new program that we're in is a little bit different. I'm kind of interested to see how it affects the way that the property sets up and hunts. I don't think it's going to have a major impact, but this pollinator program in Iowa has become really popular because of flowers and with bees and things like that. But with that being said, it's shorter grass. It's a lot more flowers. We're finding now this actually being our second year. Last year we had to keep it mowed. The CRP program is really strict on how you need to maintain it, which is a constant work. But it's now getting to about chest high. So we're finding where we used to be able to look out and glass and see deer, the deer are starting to disappear. So it is offering that cover, but it's also got a lot of clover in it. So it's also basically added almost 100 acres of food source to the property. So before, where that switchgrass and stuff wasn't offering the nutritional benefits, so we could basically pull deer into our food plots. Now, when they're on clover and different things that they're browsing throughout this the pollinator program, they're out in the middle of fields too. So I'm kind of interested to see how it changes the dynamics of the property a little bit. A lot of people are like, oh, I can squeeze a food plot in here, I can squeeze a food plot in here, and they do it. And one thing that you have to realize is you have to look at it as a bigger picture, and at times, you can almost hurt yourself by putting in more food sources, because it spreads out your deer. And I think that the bucks that we want to kill are smarter than us a lot of the times, that you end up playing at cat and mouse. You're here and he's there, and then you're there and he's here, and it goes back and forth. So kind of looking at the property from a whole every year and assessing, hey, what's our, what does it look like? How does it set up? Let's not just put a food plot here because we think that food is good. Let's put a food plot here and figure out the purpose that it serves and what wind we can hunt it on and how it works with the other food plots and the stands. And we're very low pressure on the property because it is only 240 acres. So when we hunt where is crucial, to making sure that we can harvest deer on those food plots. If we get in the woods too early or we hunt stands that we shouldn't be hunting when we don't have a great chance of killing, it trickle-down effects and can affect our whole entire season. So it's a big chess game, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It always is on a nice-sized piece of property, and I do like what you said about the CRP. I really like kind of maybe this year is the year that maybe you see a noticeable change. You would think just naturally with, having some clover in there with now you said getting chest high or head high, 5-6 feet off the ground, that some of that CRP, that some of those grasses, that it's going to create, enough cover now for those deer to really feel comfortable and start bedding in there. But it sounds like a perfect combo. But Joe, like on that side of things, how do you go about, if you want to share with the listeners, so to speak, of following what the Iowa DNR wants with the CRP and some of the changes? And do you look at those changes with your overall plan for the year, if that changes at all, like some of your food plots and greens and crop fields, stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's usually like a 10-year term. So we know now for the next 10 years it's going to remain pretty consistent, which is nice. So a lot of the maintaining the CRP is burning in the spring and just keep it to make sure that we're that's growing the best that it can, getting trees out of there, making sure that it's clean, and then knowing that one of the things that it affects is we don't plant a lot of clover around here because the deer can find it everywhere. So I think that's one of the changes that is going to be, that's not going to be such a coveted food source if you have a little quarter-acre clover field, because once they step outside of that quarter acre, they've got another 100 acres to go browse on where they're also in tall grass and are much more safe. So I think that's probably one of the things that it's going to change this year, and we're going to be playing with a little bit. We don't do a ton of clover anyway because it is in grass, and farmers do plant it around the area. But that's definitely one thing that I think is going to, just the draw to that clover isn't probably going to be as great with 100 acres all around us of it.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's understandable. One thing I always think that I think a lot of people kind of overlook too, Joe, and maybe it's definitely something I don't think a lot of guys talk about, but do you pay attention to what your neighbors do, and so to speak, do you follow suit in what they're doing? I'm not QDM wise, but I'm talking your management plan. I really kind of beg to differ that it's important to do kind of the opposite of what they're doing, because and I know deer are sort of lazy by nature, and if they can get food 10 feet away, that's where they're going to get it. So if you're following a suit sometimes with some of your neighbors, sometimes that's counterintuitive. So do you pay attention to north, south, east, and west of you and what they're doing and how you kind of manage your place?
Yeah. So this will be, maybe there'll be people who can relate to this and maybe there won't. So we are, a lot of places and a lot of people that you talk to, it's like, oh, the neighbors have a management plan and this and that. Our neighbors don't. Like, a lot of it's crop ground, it's fence lines. So a lot of times, we've got state land around us. So obviously we can't control what, it's a lot of it's gun hunters. So people, it's just people with different, some people want to shoot trophy bucks, some people just want meat, some people don't care, they do it for the sport, so there aren't a lot. It's not like the neighbor next to us has another 240 and they have strict management practices and plant food plots and stuff like that. We don't have that around here. So for us, a lot of it is when we look at what the neighbors are doing, it's looking at what can we do to pull deer in during gun season, or to create habitat that mature bucks want to be in so they have a safe zone when gun season comes around. Or the state of Iowa does do a good job of planting food plots on some of the state land, or at least around here they do. So a lot of the larger chunks of state land will have typically corn food plots where they'll leave some acres in corn. And obviously we aren't going to I mean, we're going to plant corn no matter what as part of our food plot strategy. But also when they rotate that around, what that affects on our property a lot of times is deer, the way that deer travel, especially during late season. So sometimes they'll have it closer to our land. Sometimes maybe it'll be on the way opposite end of the state land. So that might determine how we hunt late season, even during, through those, in those transition areas. We do a lot of hunting over food plots because I want to have the least amount of impact on the property as possible. But I am especially early and especially late. If we've got tags to fill, I mean, I think that deer hunting is pretty darn simple, and we've been very successful right off the bat in October when a lot of people don't hunt mornings, and we've been successful late season where a lot of people only sit on food. In the early season, we hunt mornings because we know where they bed, we know where they eat, and if we can get in and out clean in between that, and I mean, there's a good opportunity to shoot a deer, and late season, same thing. We know where they bed, we know where they eat, whether that's on our property or whether that's even traveling to the state land, or a farmer did a poor job of getting their corn out that year, and there's where deer are feeding, changing those hunting tactics and getting in between them. It's not all shooting deer on food plots. It's getting to them in between points A and point B to be successful, and that stuff changes each and every year.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I like what you're saying there too. It sounds like you use a lot of let's call the green food plots that you would potentially plant as more as something extra for the deer, and you're not really pressuring them there, which I like, and I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, especially being surrounded with state land, that's a good way to just give them a safe zone and let them be kind of free and not pressured. Joe, is there anything else you do to kind of like habitat-wise, safety-wise, I'll call it, to just give them sanctuary just to be at? Is there anything special you guys do for that?
Yeah, a lot of it is just playing from a pressure standpoint. Like, it's funny. Like, I look back, let's say 5 years ago, to we hunted in the woods a lot. We were always in the woods, and I look at when we stopped hunting in the woods and we started hunting smart on the perimeter and hunting food plots on the perimeter, the quality deer and our success rate went up drastically. So I think that's been probably from a safety standpoint. What we try to do is we try to create the bedding, which we're 100 acres of woods. That's primarily, they'll bed in the CRP. They'll bed on fence lines in the CRP and stuff, but the majority of the time when it gets to hunting season, it seems like and when pressure from surrounding areas push them in, the way that our property sets up, primarily they're in the woods bedding. So rather than going into them, waiting for them to come out, what we've tried to do is plant those food plots and then stay out of the woods as much as possible and plant those food plots close to bedding, which isn't difficult on 240 acres, or at least how our property sets up. If we plant those food plots close to bedding and the deer feel safe in those food plots, and we're hunting them on the right winds, and we have stands set up to where we can get in and out without them knowing that we're there, there's no reason why a buck, even on October 17th, like the middle of the quote-unquote October lull, why there isn't any reason where he gets an itch to get up and to come out and munch a little bit well before it gets dark. And we've been able to capitalize on that by kind of setting up our farms that way, by hunting that way, and by monitoring trail cameras, just kind of abiding by those low-impact principles and staying after it. On our place, I don't feel like there's a bad time of the year to hunt. I really think that from October 1st when we open to January 10th when we close, any single one of those days, because of the practices we've put in, we can be successful on it.
Yeah, I like what you said there. Access is so key, and one thing that I think is unique is the fact that you guys said you're hunting a lot of early October. So obviously, to me, what you said there, Joe, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of that applies even for those morning hunts in October, which a lot of people think is counterintuitive. But are you doing the same thing? You're basically just hunting a fringe, which again, in the morning, if you're going to hunt, a lot of people hunt and they dive into the timber, which is probably the wrong thing because your odds are you're going to bump them out of the bed. But are you just basically doing that, and it's either one of those things to where, on the edge of a field or a food plot, it's going to be hit or miss, or either going to be in the bed or you're going to catch one coming in late? Is that kind of how you're doing it?
Right. Yeah. Basically, we've got a couple of unique spots on the farm, and one actually is in the timber, but it's not where they're going. Just historically, it's not where they bed. So typically, it is, you're getting outside of what you're leaving on the ground scent wise, which one of them we can street. It's sneaking right through the creek, straight up a ridge, and you're there. And on a certain wind, you can get in and out completely, I feel completely undetected. You don't impact the deer movement at all. And if you kill something, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So,
right.
But yeah, just super smart. And it's not like, hey, October 1st through, it's not like we're hunting every single day, but when the conditions are right, a lot of times, when you talk about the neighbors too, we live in crop country. So when the neighbor has 100 acres of corn that I promise you no one stepped foot in all year in that a lot of times we don't even start picking up pictures of bucks until the corn starts coming out, or until, they start. So that's a lot of it too. When we know the neighbors are picking, hey, we know that our deer density on our property is going to increase. And sometimes that first week after they start picking, or, whether it's cutting silage earlier, when they are in their fields and eliminating cover there, we know that ours are increasing. And if we're doing a good job, monitoring trail cameras, maybe we get one picture of a buck in August, and we know there's 100 acres to the north where he's probably living. Well, I promise you, when that 100 acres is eliminated, he's got to find a new home. And, chances are it's probably going to be on us. So sometimes that first week when he's moving back in, we found, he's pretty highly susceptible to being killed.
Yeah, for sure. And that's key. What you just said is using that as part of your signal to go hunt, because like you said, that deer density is about to double. So at some point, some location, some of these deer are going to be on, not saying they haven't been there before, but it's basically going to be new movement. And you're just getting that opportunity again to, like you said, hopefully put a deer tag on and get out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it even comes into, how when and I think that there's a lot of discussion about doe management on a property and the importance of that, and not getting into that, but also just from a property standpoint, it's like, you shoot a doe and it runs back into your core bedding, and then you spend a night in there tracking it and dragging it out and everything like that. Even our doe harvests are very selective. Like, we have stands that are incredibly fringe and incredibly monitored by trail cameras, to the point where it's like, this is where you go when you're gonna start, taking care of some of your buck to doe ratio and harvesting some of those does. Or for the kids, when we take the kids out hunting, it's like, this is where we're going to kill a doe, and we're doing it on this type of condition. So we try not to even let we're even selective in that, just because if we know we need to take X amount of does off the property in a year, would like to, ideally, it doesn't mean that when a doe walks by, we kill it every single time. It's very much based on a lot of other factors as well.
No, that makes total sense, and I think that should be a part of everybody's management plan. And I don't think people realize some of the damage you do when some of those mistakes like that happen. A doe is always going to run back to where she thinks is safe, and where she thinks is safe is usually back towards bedding. And that is, just one of the worst things that can happen. So with that said, Joe, do you guys try to do maybe some of that doe management stuff like early in the season or late in the season? Do you guys have a preference to the time of year?
Yeah, a lot of it just plain. I like to do it early. I just, from a mental standpoint, I struggle late, because if we have food and no one else around does, our deer density just quadruples. So we could be harvesting those that it's not going to affect what's on our property, the other 80% of the year. And I just have such a hard time mentally if it does, like thinking that I just can't stand shooting does late that have fawns, and I'm like, man, that could have been my best buck, genetically.
Yeah, I have that feeling too.
I do struggle with that. Yeah, so early is, we do try to fill those tags early, and then all the way kind of up through the rut is when I'd like to get most of the doe killing out of the way, but a lot of times we're running low on meat late season, or we have always have like a late muzzleloader tag. So I love to hunt, man, and I love to shoot stuff, and it's tough for me if I have a need for the meat, and if I still have tags in my pocket, it's tough for me to not pull the trigger. but ideally, I'd like to do it early.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm exactly the same way. I always think, like, who knows what deer that mother doe is killing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Too funny. So one thing I thought I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, is did you say you guys don't really do a lot of clover? And if that's the case, what are you actually planting as far as some of your green food plots?
Yeah, you heard me right. We do not plant a lot of clover because we're kind of surrounded by it. So we have grain is king. So we do corn for late season. We do beans, but the tough thing about the beans is that the deer just hammer them. So we've put fences around them, which has saved them. We literally, like, I have a 3-acre bean field. There would not be a pod in that if it wasn't fenced in. And by fencing it in, it will reach maturity. But if we want to hunt over it, and this is kind of an interesting, I guess, management note, I haven't really been able to capitalize over my beans because come rut, if we still have that fence up, a buck's gonna run through it. They're just tearing around with their head down, and we'll find a strand of that fence stretching 100 yards into the woods. So typically the longest that fence will last is into the rut. So I just haven't found a way to successfully keep the beans protected until late season. But what it has done is, because in Iowa our gun seasons come in at the beginning of December. So if during November, a fence goes down or we drop the fence or something, which typically the deer won't get on it right away, but once the weather starts getting bad, which starts usually around Thanksgiving time, the deer will be in those beans, and will have a 3-acre bean food plot will last about 3 weeks. And typically it's been right during gun season, which I just have doe tags usually for gun season. We try to keep our property to very low pressure and just use it as a sanctuary as a whole. But our trail cameras will go off, and they'll be, the field will just be full. But from a big management standpoint, yes, we planted a food plot. We didn't get to necessarily utilize it for hunting, but it protected a whole lot of deer for a very crucial 3-week period of time. So when we look at it as a management, as a whole, that food plot is incredibly beneficial. And I think probably one of the things that has impacted our ability to get bucks to maturity, maybe more than anything, is having that food there when they need it and protecting them from, just allowing those 3-year-olds to survive gun season. But with that being said, so we have corn, which is late season. It's phenomenal to hunt. The beans, which I just talked about. And outside of that, a lot of it is just turnips, radishes. We start hunting October 1st, and pretty much, a frost soon thereafter. So they'll be in our turnips and radishes from the beginning of season all the way until they've eaten all of them. So that's pretty much kind of our go-to greens, and they just, they absolutely pound them. This year we're going to do more of it, overseeding turnips and radishes into our beans. We're going to do that here in probably the next 2 weeks, as the weather permits, and we're doing our fall food plots. so that, even if those beans are eaten out that I mentioned, we're at least going to have some food there as well, but a little bit of diversity. So playing around with a little bit of different stuff like that this year.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, like what I think you said, which is the opposite of a lot of people, you're actually letting your beans kind of stand and not utilize them when they're green, so to speak. You're letting them basically drying out and using that towards late December when obviously the beans are brown, but to give them that food is dedicated at that time.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And then this year,
that's awesome.
We are doing a little bit different this year, just trying it different. Before, I fenced in the whole entire beans and adhered to that, exactly what you just said. This year, we've split it into two different spots to potentially drop one of them a little bit earlier and trying to hunt it while it's still green, kind of right off the bat, or utilize it a little bit more to try to harvest something. Or, but otherwise, exactly what you said. We're kind of saving those.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, and super interesting to hear how you've basically made a statement that is legitimately saving your 3-year-old and younger deer to maturity. Is surviving those first few days of gun season. And I can tell you, coming from a high-pressure state like Michigan, that's exactly what what we would love to do here. It just doesn't work because our gun season's in the middle of the rut, and million-plus gun hunters, it's pretty hard. But if I had property of any magnitude, and that would be the exact goal, is pretty much my management plan here, just because the high pressure would be to create something just to save the deer. But I like that theory quite a bit because, like you said, they may not live there all year, but if you can get them to live there during the important times, that's huge because your odds are at some point in their lives you're going to get another opportunity with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, what I love about management now when we're pulling trail cameras, it's like when you start to develop a history with those deer, exactly to your point, like there's a deer right now. I know he's on the neighbors. He's not going to be, if he survives that first, 2 days of gun season, he's going to know where he has to go to stay alive. And if he does that, then, I've got a shot at him late season. That's in my, so to me, it's like that's kind of a lot of our prep work and management plan is going towards situations like that where it's not just every year is exactly the same, but how are we going to, kill that one specific buck, and how are we going to structure it this year to do that, or what do we need to change to increase our odds of that? And obviously I'm not going to be hunting him early because he's a ghost. He doesn't, he can't kill something that isn't here. So we're structuring late season around hopefully trying to, harvest him. And every single year that, those situations change a little bit. So you just kind of alter your plan accordingly. And that's just one of the things that I enjoy so much. And I know a guy that I respect greatly one time told me, he's like, we're not just hunting deer, we're hunting a deer. And I think from just the pressure standpoint, from a management standpoint, keeping that in the back of my head has been very, very huge. Those days where the wind isn't just right, or situations don't quite align, or it might not be wise. Thinking that that one mistake, those two mistakes throughout the course of the year, that even if you get busted by a doe, that buck's smarter and he's back 100 yards and he's different, and that might change his patterns and make him, you might have blown an opportunity to kill him that season. So really trying to think of not hunting deer, we're hunting a specific deer, and trying to do everything that we can to put ourselves in a position to do just that is kind of what we're all about.
Yeah, no, that's well said, and probably a good way to kind of exit the podcast for today, but because there's a lot to digest there, but I think that's just a perfect way to end it because you are hunting not just the deer, you're hunting a deer, and that's exactly such a good mindset when you're involving management plan. But do you have just small talk, Joe, do you have anything else planned for this year besides your place in Iowa?
Yeah, I actually do. It should be a fun year. Obviously, we do a lot of filming, which is I love telling other people's stories too. But I'm going to be doing in New Mexico, archery elk hunt. And then we've got New Mexico film and rifle. We're going to be out in Colorado doing some stuff with Fred Eichler on a project for mule deer. I think Saskatchewan whitetail. I think that kind of that kind of packs up the fall pretty quick. There might be another hunt in September, but and then just some tags here in Iowa and kids hunting. So we actually were going through the calendar yesterday highlighting when we're gone, when we're home, when season starts. And it's like, man, September, October, November, December are going to be a lot of days in the field, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a lot of exciting stuff, it sounds like, for sure. But I would love to, Joe, whenever you get a chance to have you back on the show, and then kind of follow up with any kind of success down the road here. I mean, a season's sort of already approaching, which is absolutely crazy.
So much to do in so little time.
It is. It's nuts. But yeah, I'd love to have you back on, and we can chat again, and hopefully do you have any target bucks for this year right now?
We just started. We just put cameras up and just had our first pull, and got a good deer, one that we had kind of expected to see. And outside of that, nothing yet. So we'll just kind of, as we start to hopefully pull in a couple more, and that's another thing. Like I typically don't get deer where it's just like, oh, they're on this camera all the time. It's like, hey, we got a couple pictures of this one deer. And, at some point in the season, that's probably a deer that we're going to end up seeing. And if we have history of him, then we kind of can anticipate when we may see him where. So, a lot of time still remains here in this last month of trail cameras as things start to shift and stuff. But there should be some good ones around. Seems like there always is. And if there isn't, and we do our job with the food plots, hopefully we can pull one in.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, let everybody know, Joe, like where they can find you social media-wise, or.
Yeah, I think Instagram's probably the best. Joe.Sir is my handle, and we're trying to do some management, keep people up to date on what we're doing, and as we go into the season, I think our goal this year is to get out a lot more content, video content, and hunt shows and things like that. So, yeah, I would appreciate anyone looking me up.
Yep, absolutely, and definitely look forward to talking to you again, I should say. And I apologize to all the listeners. Like, I am dealing with the worst allergies today, and I'm having a hard time talking. So if I sounded ridiculous, I apologize. I've been having a hard time spitting out words, and I've been fine, for weeks, and just today has been absolutely dreadful. But anyways, Joe, thanks so much for your time, and looking forward to chatting again.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.